stand there. No, actually, could you step out of the shot? This is for serious people. That's what my husband said at 6:02 a.m., while angling our ring light toward the credenza we bought secondhand when we couldn't afford a desk. Ethan was already in the navy suit his mother calls boardroom blue. He'd set up the tripod in our living room because natural light reads better to investors, and apparently I did not. I'm just trying to help with the mock Q&A, I said, holding a stack of note cards I'd written, metrics, margins, 3 crisp pivots for the inevitable churn question. Ethan kept adjusting the camera. I can't have you in the background, Maya. We're rehearsing for tonight. Different league. International LPs, sovereign funds. Optics. The word fell between us like a door. I used to love watching him rehearse. 3 years ago he'd tremble before every demo, jaw tight enough to squeak. I'd pace beside him in socks, reworking his answers until the numbers felt like stories. StrideLayer, our logistic analytics platform, grew out of those nights, my ops brain, his product obsession, and a shared fear of running out of money. Now, the person in my living room wasn't the kid who used to whisper, "We can do this over burner coffee." He was a CEO performing competence to a lens, coached into an expensive confidence. My note card suddenly looked homemade. He glanced at my clothes, leggings, oversized Cal sweatshirt, and smiled the polite smile he gives junior hires. My mom's coming by at 11. She's going to give me final notes. Of course she was. Lila Crane is the kind of woman who can turn a brunch into a board meeting. She'd once told a reporter StrideLayer was Ethan's vision and our family's values, as if I'd been a helpful intern who fetched the whiteboard markers. My phone vibrated across the coffee table. A message from Priya, our head of finance, who used to be my boss when I managed ops at a warehouse chain and convinced her to join us for less pay and more chaos. No words. Just a screenshot. StrideLayer/Investor Gala, Budget Plus Strategic Optics, Notes. My stomach flipped. Under a section tagged Attendance Curation, there it was. Spousal presence limited to brand-aligned partners, see criteria. M. Alvarez, does not align with current positioning. Ref, Family Advisory. I read it twice. They'd made my absence a line item. Ethan didn't look up from the lens. Oh, before I forget. You don't need to come tonight. I'm aware, I said, still staring at the sentence that had surgically removed me from a life I built. It's not personal. He adjusted his pocket square. Different rooms require different fluencies. I'm fluent in the P&L, the onboarding funnel, and the 12 enterprise accounts I brought in when we couldn't hire a sales team. He finally turned. Maya, this isn't about competence. It's about fit. The last time someone told me I didn't fit, I was 19 and working nights in a bakery that didn't know what to do with a manager who spoke Spanish to the delivery drivers and English to the customers and spreadsheets to the owner. I built them a reorder system and they gave the raise to the owner's cousin. I quit, took a job that saw what I did instead of who they wanted me to be, and promised myself I'd never ignore a sign twice. Ethan's phone dinged. He angled back toward the mirror, practicing something between a nod and a bow. They'll ask about burn. I'll hit the runway, then flip to net revenue retention. Mom says don't oversmile. Mom says, I echoed, feeling the heat rise up my neck. I went into our galley kitchen and tried to breathe. The marble countertops, investor ready, Lila had said when we signed the lease, gleamed like a stage. I remembered the paper towels we used to tape over our apartment window to block glare during early Zoom calls. The morning we poured cereal into wine glasses because the bowls were all dirty and we were too tired to wash them. The day we wired our last $11,842 to a contractor with a promise we could not afford to break. I poured coffee I suddenly didn't want and texted Priya, thanks for the heads up. Who else saw? She replied immediately, exec staff. Lila insisted it get documented. Said, clarity prevents awkwardness. Then, I'm sorry. A memory flashed so vivid I had to grip the counter. The winter we pitched a freight company in Oakland. Their COO grilled Ethan on numbers until his voice shook. In the hallway, he'd pressed his forehead to the wall while I wrote a 13-bullet follow-up plan. We closed the deal 2 weeks later. Ethan bought me a plant with a sticky note, co-founder energy. The plant died in 6 months. The note lived on our fridge for 2 years. Now, I was a mismatch to a brand. I changed. Black pants, blazer, the boots that made me 4 inches taller. Unlike Ethan, I wasn't dressing to impress a fund. I was dressing to remember the woman who knows how to walk into a room and not apologize for existing in it. At 10:47, the front door opened. Lila's perfume arrived first, the floral kind that announces a person before eyesight does. She air-kissed me without landing. Maya, darling. Busy day. We have an exquisite seating chart crisis. I saw your crisis document. She tilted her head. Transparency is kindness. Erasing people is not. You're not erased, she said, peering past me at the ring light. You're simply not optimal for tonight's story. She moved into the living room like she already owned it, pressing Ethan's shoulders, smoothing a lapel that didn't need smoothing. Together they reviewed talking points I had iterated last quarter, newly lacquered with euphemisms. Every time Lila said positioning I heard people. At noon, I grabbed my bag. Ethan didn't ask where I was going. Break a leg, I said. He nodded at the camera. We don't say break to logistics people. I took the elevator down 22 floors, stepped into the November brightness of San Francisco, and walked until the air changed. Past cranes and coffee shops and the kind of gyms that look like nightclubs. I stopped in front of a travel agency I've never used and stared at a poster of Highway 1, a silver ribbon along a green cliff. I unlocked my phone. Monterey, last-minute coastal rental. A cottage with weathered shingles, a deck facing the ocean, and a kitchen older than me. Available tonight. I booked it. Back home, I packed deliberately, jeans that actually breathe, the camera I haven't used in a year, a notebook like a dare. I left the shoes Ethan preferred, clean lines, brand consistent, and took the ones that remember sidewalks. On the counter, the embossed invitation to the gala sat under a brass paperweight. StrideLayer Global Investor Evening. Only his name. I slid my spare key beside it and wrote nothing. Some exits are cleaner without punctuation. The 101 opened like a sigh. Southbound. Past airport lights, billboards trying too hard, a valley of glass meant to look like certainty. I turned up the radio and let it pick for me. A traffic report faded into a song I knew in high school, drums, a bass line that remembered my knees. I ate a gas station apple and laughed alone at the tartness of it. By the time the coast came into view, the sun was a coin sinking slow. My rental cottage was exactly as advertised, sloped floors, salt in the window tracks, a deck that made the horizon feel domestic. I heated a can of soup and sat cross-legged on a chair that should have collapsed but didn't. For the first time in months, the ocean was louder than my thoughts. I told myself I wouldn't touch my phone. I lasted an hour. When I finally turned the screen face up, it lit like a city, 19 missed calls, 31 texts, 3 voicemails labeled urgent, all time-stamped within the last 40 minutes, right after the gala's posted start. Priya, 8:13 p.m. Where are you? It's bad. Unknown number, 8:15 p.m. Ms. Alvarez, this is Jenna from VentureWire. Comment on StrideLayer's incident? Ethan, 8:17 p.m. Call me now. My thumb hovered over his name, heartbeat counting down like a timer I hadn't set. Out on the water, the last light went thin and gold. I pressed play on the first voicemail. The first voicemail was Ethan trying to sound like a press release dressed as a person. Maya, there's been a misunderstanding with the diligence packet. Call me as soon as you get this. We need alignment. His voice clipped off as if he'd reached for a different word and grabbed something made of metal. I listened to the second, tighter, faster, then the third, which had a thread pulled from it, panic. I stared at the phone long enough to watch a wave climb the dark and slide back down. The cottage smelled like old wood and salt. Somewhere outside, a buoy bell pinged, a patient metronome. The screen lit again, Ethan calling. I answered and didn't speak. For a moment, we were just breath and line. I could hear the shape of a room on his end, clinking glass, a PA system exhaling, someone dragging a chair. When he finally said my name, it was the version he used before the suits, soft in the middle. Maya, I'm here. He let out a sound I'd only heard twice, once after we closed our seed round, once when the truck with the impossible delivery time actually hit the dock early. Relief with a bruise underneath. Where are you? By the ocean, I said, because it felt like the truest answer. You? Public failure, he said, and attempted a laugh that couldn't find its footing. Grand Ballroom B. Silence again. He didn't rush to fill it like CEO Ethan would. I waited, eyes tracing the scene where black water met blacker sky. They saw it, he said finally. No spin, no ladder of context. The memo with your name. The line about positioning. It was in the diligence drive. Ingrid Hoffman stood up during my culture slide and asked why the person who built our first ops model wasn't invited. Priya warned me, I said. I told them your choice was to stay home, he said quietly. And I could hear the room, not believing me. A gull cried. The buoy let out another patient bell. I could almost see the ballroom through the line, white tablecloths, centerpieces arranged to look like spontaneity, Lila's shoulders set to a certain degree. I knew how those spaces smelled, chilled wine, rented flowers, a whisper of power outlet heat from the AV table. Why did you put my absence in a memo, Ethan? A beat. It wasn't, he stopped. Tried again. I didn't write that sentence. Did you stop it from being written? He didn't answer. The silence stretched, dragged its feet. I thought, he said, and the word came out thin, it would be easier. For who? For the night, he said, so small I almost didn't hear it. For the investors. For you. So you wouldn't feel out of place. I don't feel out of place in rooms I helped build, I said. I feel out of place in narratives where I don't exist. His breath caught, and for a second I could hear past the tuxedo, past the script. I could hear the kid in the sweatpants who once rehearsed in the reflection of our microwave because we couldn't afford a mirror big enough. Do you remember Oakland? I asked, surprising myself. The freight company. You forgot the unit economics and started sweating through your shirt. I kept my hand on the inside of your elbow while you talked so you could feel it, so you'd remember you weren't alone. I remember, he said, and I could hear him actually looking at the memory. You wrote the follow-up in the hallway on the back of a parking ticket. You. His voice faltered. I let the buoy count 2 beats. Tonight, he said, I looked for you in the crowd. Habit. Like, if I could just find you, I'd remember how to breathe. There was the intimacy I hadn't felt in a year, not romance or apology, exactly, but the old honesty that used to sit on the floor beside us when we were broke and stupid and brave. I closed my eyes, let the ocean and his voice share a room inside me. Ethan, I said, do you know what you did? He exhaled. I made you a liability. You made me a prop, I said. Then decided I didn't match the set. He didn't defend himself. In the background, someone announced something muffled, a door hissed closed. He must have stepped into the service corridor. I pictured him beside a rack of spare chairs, the hallway lighting making everything look like it had been ironed. Mom said, he started, and I heard him stop, heard the admission taste bad in his mouth. I let Mom say. I let her define what belonged. And when the sentence hit paper, it felt final. And I didn't fight it because fighting it would have meant seeing you. Really seeing you. And what happens to your story if you see me? I asked, not unkindly. Then I have to admit it's not just mine, he said. The corridor hummed around him. My cottage hummed back, refrigerator, ocean, a world that didn't care about cap tables. I waited for the part where he asked me to fix it. He didn't. It took me a second to realize the absence was the point. What do you need, Ethan? I asked, slow, careful with the word need. He took too long to answer. When he did, it was stripped of performance. I need you to not hate me. The wind moved across the deck, and the door breathed. I pulled the blanket higher around my shoulders. I don't hate you, I said. I'm tired. I know, he said. I know because I learned your tells and then ignored them. You stop finishing your coffee when you're done with a room. You wear your hair up when you're in solve mode and down when you want to be left alone. You started wearing it down all the time. I smiled despite the ache. Observant. Selective, he said. Another pause. The oldest used to fill these breaks with ideas, lists, jokes that only make sense at 2 a.m. This one held nothing but truth. Is there anything I can say? He asked, and I heard him reach for language that wasn't in his usual deck. You could say you see what you did, I said. Not to the company. To me. I do, he said, and the way he said it made it credible. No speech, no garnish. I see it. I took the parts of you that made me brave and I turned them into background. I rewrote the story so the winds were mine and the scaffolding was invisible. I made us small enough to fit in a photo and then cropped you out. The buoy answered for me, one long note. I watched the last bit of horizon go flat. Thank you, I said. Not absolution. Not yet. Just the acknowledgement that the words had arrived intact. I don't know how to make it right, he said. We're past the email apology stage. We are, I agreed. Will you? He stopped like the question was too heavy to lift. Will you talk to the board? Not to save me. To tell the truth. I think they deserve the real version. There it was. Not a rescue request. A request to witness. I'll think about it, I said, because promising anything felt like borrowing from a future I hadn't decided I wanted. Where are you really? He asked again, softer. Cottage. Monterey. I can hear a bell I keep pretending is a clock. He smiled into the phone. I could hear it. I'm in a hallway that smells like new carpet and lemon polish. He laughed, genuine this time, small and human. We used to smell like burnt coffee and hot plastic. We used to smell like trying, I said. I'm sorry, he said finally. Not the glossy kind. The kind that finds your sternum and knocks gently. Not for the headlines. For the way I made you disappear so I could fit into rooms I wasn't even sure I wanted. I sat with it. Let it warm and cool. Thank you for saying it, I said. It doesn't fix anything. I know. Ethan? Yeah. Turn off your mic, I said. Walk back in. Shake the hands you need to shake. Own what's yours. Leave my name out of your story unless you're ready to say it right. Okay, he said, and I could hear him nod. Okay. We didn't say goodbye. We let the line go quiet until the network decided for us and cut it. I set the phone on the table and listened to the ocean rehearse the same line until it sounded like truth. The cottage woke up blue fog, blue water, blue light crawling across the cracked tile. I made coffee in the dented kettle and watched the buoy do its slow metronome thing. The phone lay face down on the table like a sleeping animal. I'd slept, surprisingly. Not long, but without the dreams that chase you down hallways. When I finally picked the phone up, I didn't doomscroll. I opened notes. Title, What I Will and Won't Do. I typed slowly, the way you do when the words set precedent. I will tell the truth once, in my voice, without adjectives. I won't be a character in anyone's crisis strategy. I will name my contributions and the people who worked beside me. I won't drag families, speculate, or perform outrage. I will protect employees who didn't choose this. I won't sign anything that makes silence look like consent. I made tea while the steam curled around the list. When I sat again, the fog had thinned enough to show a dark line where the waves broke. My inbox was a bonfire, reporters, board assistants, acquaintances who'd never once liked a post suddenly thinking of me. 2 emails mattered. Priya, call when ready. Board is forming a narrative committee. I said you'd respond on your timeline. David Winters, board chair, we'd value a conversation. Off the record if you prefer. Discreet. I called Priya first. Always Priya first. Her hello broke into a laugh that wasn't funny. It's a circus. I'm in a conference room with 7 people and not one of them has eaten anything but optics in 24 hours. How are you? I asked. Tired. Protective. Done minimizing. Maya, they're going to try to make this about your absence instead of the sentence that wrote you out. They're drafting miscommunication language. Then we don't feed that frame, I said, tasting the old muscle memory of a plan forming. It felt familiar but not consuming, like finding an old jacket that still fits but you don't need to live in anymore. I'll put out one statement. Short. Factual. No names beyond mine. And I'll send a memo to employees, my memo, not theirs. Priya exhaled. They'll dangle NDAs. For your protection and all that. I know. I looked at the ocean as if it could co-sign. I won't sign. We worked for 15 minutes the way we used to, quietly braid logistics and kindness. Priya would forward my message to the employee Slack with a simple preface, read this, then decide for yourself. She'd also compile a doc of the early credits, who built the first version, who saved us in month 7, who turned a bug into a feature at 3 a.m., because if we were naming, we would name everyone. When we hung up, I opened a blank email and addressed it to the board, legal, and Lila, because sometimes the point is who is in the line, not the body of the text. Subject, Statement of Record, Maya Alvarez. 4 paragraphs. I co-created the first ops architecture, negotiated our first 3 enterprise contracts, and structured the pilot that generated our first $1 million in ARR. These points are documented in early internal decks and emails, dates attached. An internal memo for last night's event categorized my presence as misaligned with positioning. This reflected neither my abilities nor my history with StrideLayer. It reflected a value judgment I do not share. I will not participate in narrative management designed to minimize the harm of that judgment. I will not sign an NDA or accept compensation in exchange for silence or revision. I wish the employees of StrideLayer stability and credit. Any requests from the company to use my name going forward must include my review and written approval. No flourish. No threat. I attached 5 PDFs, old pitch decks with both our names on the cover, a contract summary with my initials in the margin, a photo of the whiteboard from our first warehouse pilot, my handwriting too neat to be his. I CC'd Priya. I BCC'd no one. I hit send. Next, I opened LinkedIn and wrote a post that fit above the Seymour fold. I won't do interviews, but I will say this once. Women in startups aren't help. We're builders. My name was removed from a story I helped write. A memo made my absence look strategic. I disagree. For the employees wondering what to do next, take care of each other, save your receipts, and remember your work matters even if someone else takes the stage. I'm not seeking attention. I'm seeking accuracy. Then I'm going back to work, on my terms. I turned off comments. Not because I didn't want support but because sometimes applause feels like another stage. The phone rang immediately, Jenna from VentureWire. I let it go to voicemail, then wrote her a short email, appreciate the outreach. I'm not giving quotes. If you cover this, center the employees and the product. Rumors about families are noise. She replied respect within minutes. I liked Jenna more for the word she didn't write, exclusive. David texted, received. Could we still speak? I stared at his name until the screen dimmed. Then I wrote, you may send questions in writing. I'll respond in writing. No NDAs. No attribution without my consent. My answers will be factual and brief. He sent a typing bubble, then, understood. Questions forthcoming. I left the phone on the table and finally lifted my camera. The lens was dusty. I cleaned it with the corner of my shirt the way my professor said not to. I took 3 pictures from the deck, horizon, buoy, the chipped mug my hand had warmed. When the shutter clicked, something unclenched. The ocean did not pose. It existed. At noon I drafted the employee memo. I wrote like I was talking across a table. Team, you don't need me to tell you what's happening. Here are the only things I'll offer. If anyone asks you to sign something you don't understand, take 24 hours and let someone trustworthy read it. Keep copies of your work. Not proprietary data, proof of effort. Your calendars, your emails where you saved a release, the doc where you listed the 6 ugly fixes you shipped at midnight. If you need a reference that names what you did, you can list me. I'll tell the truth. Build things that outlast rooms. Maya. I sent it to Priya and asked her to distribute. 10 minutes later my inbox started blooming with quiet thank yous from addresses I barely recognized, QA analysts, a recruiter who'd joined last month, an engineer who wrote, I was there for the microwave rehearsals. Thank you for naming the room. The board's questions arrived at 2:11 p.m, stamped with legal caution. I answered them on a walk, voice to text, edited when I got back. Timeline, roles, decisions I made and decisions I opposed. I didn't mention Lila. I didn't need to. Systems tell on their architects. By late afternoon the wind shifted and cleared the fog. The buoy went silent, the world didn't need its metronome. I sat on the steps and read the single thing that felt like a future. An email from Ingrid Hoffman, subject separate from StrideLayer. One line, coffee next week? I'm more interested in what you'll build than what you'll burn. I wrote back, Wednesday, 10 a.m. somewhere with bad chairs and decent light. When the sun slid lower, my phone started vibrating again with links I didn't open. Priya texted a screenshot from Slack, the memo pinned, a string of blue hearts and nothing performative. David wrote that the board accepted my conditions and would respond in writing. There was relief in the formality. Ethan didn't text. That felt right. We had said the true parts already. At dusk I took the battery out of the phone, not as punishment this time but as ritual. I put it on the windowsill beside my camera cap and the little shell I found on the first morning here. The cottage exhaled. Somewhere a neighbor lit a fire that smelled like cedar and memory. I wrote one more line in notes, beneath what I will and won't do. I will build a room where no one has to ask if they belong. Then I closed the app and opened the door. The ocean kept its appointments without me. I knew I was really going back when the cottage key felt heavier on my palm than my car keys. At dawn I packed like I was answering a question. What do you need to be yourself in a city that taught you to perform? Camera. Notebook. One blazer that doesn't itch. The boots that remember sidewalks. I left the cottage swept and quiet, the mug on the counter upside down like a period. Highway 1 unwound north, giving me every reason to turn around, see cliffs, fog braided with sun, a gull riding a slipstream so perfectly it looked like rest. But the risk I'd written down in my notes app mattered, re-enter on my terms or let the old orbit define them for me. I drove. San Francisco appeared in stages, distant glint, then angles, then the sudden intimacy of a toll booth asking you to commit. The bridge hum vibrated through the car frame. I stayed in the slow lane, not as caution, but as choice. First stop wasn't Ingrid. It was the warehouse where StrideLayer started pretending it was a company. South of Market, 2 blocks from a taqueria that never learned our names, under a row of windows that refused to open. The roll-up door was half down. A different startup's logo hung crooked over the entrance, already sun-faded. I parked and sat there long enough to watch a forklift make a lazy arc. My body remembered the inside without needing to see it, the scuffed epoxy floor, the whiteboard with my handwriting thinning in the corners, the cheap space heater we huddled around like a small sun. I almost didn't go in. Then I did. A receptionist with a nose ring and a sweatshirt looked up from a laptop. We're close to visitors. I used to work in this space, I said. Years ago. She weighed me against her to-do list, then shrugged. 5 minutes. Don't touch the robots. I walked the perimeter. The corner where we taped a printout of our first $10,000 check. The patch of wall where I pressed my forehead the day a deal died and Priya slid me a granola bar like it was triage. Even the air smelled the same, dust, ozone, ambition. On my way out, the receptionist said, "You're Maya, right?" I stopped. "Yes? My brother interned for you before grad school. He said you asked what he wanted to learn before you told him what you needed. I smiled. Did he learn it? He runs ops at a battery company now, she said. He still writes lists on whiteboards like they're spells. Outside, I sat in the car and let the city noise arrange my nerves. The risk wasn't being seen. The risk was being reabsorbed into old hierarchies, old habits, rooms that would invite me back on the condition I play my former part. Ingrid's email had said Wednesday, 10 a.m. I proposed a cafe with bad chairs and decent light, and she'd agreed without negotiation. I arrived early and chose a table near the window and far from the door, visibility without parade. The barista wrote MAYA on my cup in block letters that gave the name a new stance. Ingrid arrived exactly on time. No entourage, no performance. She wore a navy suit without the hungersome suits try to pass off as polish. Up close, her presence was tidy but not severe, like a sentence that had every word it needed and nothing extra. Maya, she said, and it sounded like a greeting to an equal, not an asset. Ingrid. We didn't shake hands the way Americans make contracts out of touch. We nodded, sat, and let the bad chair remind us we had bodies before we had positions. Thank you for coming, she said. I read your statement. It wasn't a performance. Exactly. She set her phone face down, like a small ceremony. I don't want to relitigate your past. I want to discuss your terms for a future. I waited. In the pause, the espresso machine sighed. A kid at the next table tried to sound out rhinoceros. The city committed today around us. I fund builders, Ingrid said simply. Not performances. My question is boring and profound. What problem will you solve if no one is watching? The relief I felt at the question made me laugh, surprising both of us. Onboarding entropy, I said. The way growing companies slowly lose the muscle that made them alive. I want to build a consultancy that installs habits instead of decks. Teach teams to keep the first 30 customers feeling like they're still seen when there are 30,000. Ingrid's mouth turned, her version of excitement. Evidence? I slid a folder across the table. Case notes I'd typed in the cottage. 3 examples from companies I'd helped quietly this year. Not logos. Outcomes. Shorter time to value. Lower churn after month 3. A culture doc that turned into a ritual instead of a poster. She read quickly but not lazily, the way people read when they respect your time and their own. What do you need? She asked. Runway for a year, I said. 5 clients max at any time. Capacity to say no to work that's really PR and ops clothing. A small scholarship program to train ops leads from communities that never get recruited out of college because they were never recruited into college. And the freedom to never wear shoes that make me mean. She smiled. Budget? I named a number that paid people fairly without inflating our urgency into bloat. Conditions? She asked. The room I build won't evaluate partners by pedigree, I said. No family advisors. No optics memos. If you want updates, you'll get them, but they'll look like progress, not theater. And I won't sell a pattern that isn't ready, even if a giant logo wants it yesterday. Good, she said. Because giant logos love yesterday. We talked terms in full sentences, not bullet points. We disagreed once about equity. She wanted a little, I wanted very little, and found a middle that let us both breathe. 25 minutes in, she extended her hand, finally. It didn't feel like a command. It felt like a bridge. Welcome back to the city, she said. I'm not sure I ever belonged to it, I answered. But I'm willing to rent space in it again. On the sidewalk, the air smelled like sourdough and bus brakes. I texted Priya a single word, yes. She called from a stairwell to whisper yell, I can hear the shape of your smile. As I turned the corner, I saw Lila. Not at a gala, not on a pedestal, at a florist's, examining peonies like they could absolve her. She didn't see me at first. When she did, her face went through 3 expressions in one breath. Calculation, apology, something like grief. Maya, she said, stepping out onto the sidewalk. You look well. I am, I said. It was true. She nodded at my tote. Back to work? Different work, I said. Mine. Her fingers worried a leaf off the peony stem. For a second, I thought she'd start into her version of repair, offers disguised as olive branches, invitations that feel like debts. She surprised me. I misread the room, she said, voice low. Not the ballroom. The room you and Ethan built. I thought polish could do what work did. I'm sorry. I let the apology stand. That was new for both of us. Ethan? I asked. At the office, she said. He looks at the door like he expects you to walk through it and rescue something. I won't, I said. I know, she said, and I believed her. It's good. We stood in that small honesty until a delivery truck barked and the city returned to itself. She went inside to pay. I walked on. By afternoon, I had a signed term sheet in my inbox, a lease possibility on an office with big windows and no lobby sculpture, and a calendar block titled "Call 3 People Who Taught You Something." I called my old warehouse manager, my community college professor, and the bakery owner who hadn't given me the raise but had taught me how to schedule freight by hand when the system crashed. I thanked each of them. None asked for a logo. I ended the day on a bench near the waterfront where we once calculated burn with a pen that kept dying. The wind came off the bay colder than I remembered. A seagull eyed my sandwich like a consultant. Re-entry wasn't loud. It wasn't even dramatic. It was a series of small decisions that, together, said, I won't orbit anyone who can't hold me at center. I walked to my car and set my palm on the hood like you do with a creature you're trying not to spook. When the screen lit, there was one message from Ethan. I heard you're meeting Ingrid. I'm glad. Please build something that doesn't need saving. I typed and deleted 3 responses. Then I wrote, we both deserve to work in rooms that don't mistake help for background. I didn't wait for the dots. I drove back to the cottage with the city in my rearview and a lease URL starred in my inbox. The key felt lighter now. The risk had turned into a road. I got back to the cottage before sunset, the sky done pretending it was dramatic. A few gulls argued over nothing. The ocean went about its job. I carried in groceries like promises, pasta, tomatoes, basil, a lemon, coffee for the morning. The term sheet from Ingrid sat in my inbox like a calm, well-made chair. I could have called Priya, could have texted the professor who wrote my first reference, or the warehouse manager who taught me that urgent is a label, not a fact. Instead, I decided to do the thing I tell other people to do and almost never do myself, run a small experiment on myself before building anything for anyone else. One night. No heroics. A rehearsal, but honest. I started with a rule wall, just a page in my notebook, but written like it would have consequences if I ignored it. Founder habits, Maya V1. 0. Write first, answer later. Mornings belong to building, not reacting. Meetings max 25 minutes unless we're making something together. Credit is a deliverable. Name names in docs. Add a sources section to ops. No optics slides. If a process only works in a deck, it doesn't work. Boundaries are infrastructure. Phone out of room after 9 p.m. Teach while doing. Every fix produces a one-page guide. How we knew / what we did / why it matters. Don't hire exhaustion. If someone's selling martyrdom, pass. I tore the page out and taped it to the cabinet above the stove with painter's tape I found in a drawer. It looked like a child's first certificate. Good. Dinner was the opposite of elevated. Pasta slicked with olive oil, cherry tomatoes blisters, basil torn with fingers that still remembered hospitality shifts. I ate at the counter and practiced a ritual I wanted to keep, close the day with 3 sentences. Not a journal, just a bottom line. Said yes to a future without asking who would clap. Saw the room where we started and didn't want it back, only the way it smelled like trying. Risk feels like a door I'm finally the one holding. After dishes, I set a timer for 90 minutes, the length of deep work I recommend and never gift myself, and opened a fresh document titled Company, Unfancy. The plan wasn't a deck. It was a table that asked boring, necessary questions. Purpose, no mission. Poetry help growing teams keep their first customer muscle. What we actually do, diagnose onboarding entropy, implement 2 habits, leave. Artifacts left behind, ops field guide, 12 pages, 2 facilitations recorded, a calendar ritual anyone can run. How we'll know. Time to first value reduced, churn after month 3 down 15%, fewer. Who owns this? Messages. Who we're for, founders allergic to theater, ops leads hungry for pattern literacy. Who we're not for, logos shopping for optics, leaders who say culture and mean compliance. At minute 40, an email pinged from a reporter with a subject line sharp enough to cut me. Were you the secret brain? I moved the mouse toward it and stopped. Rule 1. Write first, answer later. I dragged the email into a folder named Tomorrow and let the timer keep its promise. I wrote the first teach while doing guide to prove point 6 wasn't a performance. Topic: how to stop meetings from eating your product. 3 sections, 1 page each. I built it like a recipe. Ingredients, agenda template, timer, a person allowed to say enough, method, cut default meeting length to 25, add pre-read questions that begin with we decided or we need, taste, what it feels like when it's working, silence at the right time, not the scared kind. When the timer went off, I didn't sprint toward the phone. I stretched, the good embarrassing kind that cracks your back, and made tea. On the deck, the dark had settled into itself. Somewhere far off, a boat pushed through it like a pencil line. I tested the boundary I'd broken 100 times. I left the phone charging in the kitchen and took a walk without it. The path behind the cottage curved like a sentence that knows where it's going. No music, no podcast explaining anything to me. Just the sound of my shoes on damp boards and the ocean doing its textural math. By the time I came back, I wanted to check everything. Inbox, Slack pings I don't have anymore, the news. I washed a cup instead. I folded the dish towel. I did small chores that finished. Then I checked, once. 2 emails mattered. From Priya, board accepted your written-only condition. Legal tried to fix the Word memo. I changed it back. FYI, 3 engineers sent me your employee note. Blue hearts. From Ingrid, attached, a clean term sheet. Take the night. We'll countersign in the morning. Also, your artifacts list made me annoyingly happy. I smiled, there in the quiet, at the phrase annoyingly happy. I printed nothing. I signed nothing. Night meant night. I tried on the calendar I want. Block named no performative mornings from 8 to 10, daily. A recurring 3 p.m. slot called teach a thing whether to a person, a document, or my future self. A Friday hour labeled credit audit to catch invisible work before it disappears. I removed the hold I still had on Tuesdays for StrideLayer, exec sync. The calendar asked, are you sure? The answer was a relief. I wrote a tiny hiring rubric for first 3 people even though I'd promised myself I wouldn't hire yet. I only bent the rule, didn't break it. The categories were patient, skill, pattern thinking, kindness under load, aversion to theater. Scored 1 to 5, with a final question, would you trust this person to say we're wrong in front of a client? If no, it's no. At 9:03, I did the last hard thing. I turned the phone off and took the battery out. The cottage changed pitch when it got quiet like that. The refrigerator became the loudest machine in the world. I brushed my teeth and caught my own eye in the mirror. No boardroom blue, no ring light. Just a face that looked like it might keep its own promises this time. In bed, I didn't scroll. I read the manual for my camera like a person who intends to use it. I dog-eared a page about exposure compensation and laughed at the phrase. What a way to name a habit for life, adjusting how much light you're letting in so you don't wash out the subject. I thought about Ethan once. Not the gala, not the memo. Just the hallway where he said the true thing, that he'd cropped me out to make the story symmetrical. I hoped he slept somewhere that smelled like new carpet and relief. I didn't reach for the phone to check. Rule 5. Boundaries are infrastructure. Before sleep, I added 2 lines to the rule wall. Sleep is part of the project. The future can wait until morning. The ocean made its case outside and I didn't argue. I let the night be the night, and for once, that felt like progress more than abstinence. When I dreamed, it wasn't of stages or corridors. It was of a room with big windows and no lobby sculpture, a table with 3 chairs, and a whiteboard that already had names on it. Not mine alone. I woke just before the light. The battery lay on the sill like a coin I hadn't spent. Morning made everything factual. Light on the deck, coffee in the chipped mug. The battery back in the phone like a promise I could keep without breaking myself. I signed Ingrid's term sheet with the same pen I used on our first warehouse rental. Cheap, reliable, ink that dries fast. Then I opened my calendar to a square that had been a someday and was now a line with an address. Client 001, HarborCart. Mid-market e-commerce platform scaling from 8K to 50K merchants. Symptoms, onboarding bottlenecks, churn spike after month 3, a Slack full of who owns this? I picked HarborCart first because they were honest in their ask. We are losing the muscle that made us good. We don't want a theater. We want our hands back. They occupied the 3rd floor of a building that used to be a print shop, high windows, daylight pooling on concrete, desks that looked purchased in bursts. The front desk plant was thriving. That's always a tell. Someone waters even when no one's watching. A product manager named Tamsin met me at the door with a notebook already open to a clean page. We made a deck, she said, sheepish. I'm allergic to decks, I said, smiling. Let's start with a wall. We took over a conference room with bad chairs and unambitious art. I wrote HarborCart today at the top of a whiteboard and taped up 3 blank sheets. What hurts? What's real? What we'll try, this week. People arrived in 2s and 3s. Ops lead. Onboarding specialist. An engineer with headphones around his neck like a life preserver. A customer success manager who'd brought snacks and a face that said she'd been keeping things together with post-its and grace. I'm here for 4 weeks, I said. 2 habits installed, then I leave. My calendar is in the shared drive. The only rule we can't break is we don't call optics a plan. They laughed, relieved and wary. We began with the quietest person, always the quietest first. Anna, Tamsin said softly, and the support rep with the snacks looked up like someone had just said we see you out loud. What hurts? I asked. Day 3, Anna said. Merchants sign up. Day 1 is confetti, emails, a webinar, we call it a welcome wave. Then silence. On day 3 they realize they can't get their catalog ported. They file a ticket. We triage. It's a pattern now. What's real? I wrote under it. Anna didn't hesitate. We don't have a clear owner for catalog import. Engineering says it's not a bug. Product says it's not on the roadmap. Ops says it's a temp workaround. What we'll try? I asked. The engineer, Ravi, spoke without performing. Give me 1 week with a CS person glued to my chair. We'll write a rough importer and a checklist for weird formats. Not pretty, but usable. I nodded. Name your glue. Anna, he said immediately. We made the habit official. Buddy builds, engineer plus CS, 90 minutes a day all week. Outcome is a tool plus a 1-pager titled How We Knew / What We Did / Why It Matters. I pulled a timer from my bag and set it on the table like a small, bright boundary. Next hurt, activation call chaos. Tamsin ran the ritual that had turned into a maze. 10 agendas, 1 hour each, everyone exhausted, no one choosing. We used my guide from the cottage, How to Stop Meetings from Eating Your Product, and customized it for their reality. Activation calls became 25-minute sprints with a pre-read that started with we decided or we need. We assigned a person with permission to say enough. Anna volunteered. I wrote her name on the board and circled it like a crown. By noon we had 2 experiments, 3 owners, 1 timer, and a wall that looked like a room waking up. I ate my lunch with them at the long table by the windows, no founder huddle elsewhere for optics. I asked each person the question Ingrid had asked me, what problem will you solve if no one is watching? The answers were humble and specific. Fix the webhook that double fires. Map the error code so customers don't feel crazy. Teach sales what soon means in engineering. At 3 p.m., I ran Teach a Thing, my calendar ritual made public. I showed them the simplest tool I know that saves teams from pretending. The decision log, date, decision, driver, descent, do or die. We created the doc live and wrote the first entry. We will stop selling custom import timelines until the importer exists. Driver, churn risk. Descent, sales nervous. Do or die, customers trust us when we stop lying. The sales lead nodded, throat working. I'll tell the team, she said. With your words. At day's end, the CEO, a man who looked allergic to buzzwords, asked if he could talk. We stood near the stairwell where the light was honest. What's your read? He asked. You're not broken, I said. You're unpracticed at telling the truth fast. Install 2 habits, buddy builds and decision log. Name owners publicly. Then let the work make the next rule. He looked like a person who'd been offered water. What about optics? Optics are what happen when people who don't trust the work try to control how it's seen, I said. Make the work good, and the seeing will catch up. He smiled without posing. How do we keep you forever? You don't, I said. You keep each other. I left on time. No heroics. On the sidewalk, I answered one text from Priya, how was it? With a photo of the whiteboard and the line, we picked who says enough. She responded with a blue heart and the word envy in the good way. Back at the cottage, I did my 3-sentence bottom line. First habit caught. The room can hear itself again. Anna is a leader. She just needed the circle around her name. Work said my name without me saying it first. On day 3, Buddy Builds shipped a draft importer that cut the catalog pane in half. Not elegant, but not theater. The 1-pager they wrote was better than mine, screenshots, a note that read when it fails loud. That's on purpose. Activation calls finished at minute 24 with decisions captured in the log. A merchant wrote I didn't feel sold to. I felt taught. I printed that sentence and taped it to Harbor Cart's kitchen fridge like a magnet. In week 2, I ran a credit audit. We stood by the wall and named invisible work. The QA intern who'd been mapping error codes got a built this shout in #releases. The operations assistant who'd quietly standardized welcome emails finally had her template in the pattern library with her initials at the bottom. I watched shoulders drop an inch. The room was exhaling. On the last day of week 4, churn after month 3 was down 13%. Time to first value dropped by 32 hours. The decision log made disagreements boring in the best way, visible and accountable. The wall had pages turned sideways where new rules were born. I took a photo and didn't post it anywhere. We wrapped with a circle of chairs and a rule. Each person had to thank someone for a specific, unglamorous act. The engineer thanked Anna for catching a sequence of 3 emails that accidentally made a merchant feel scolded. The CEO thanked the sales lead for rewriting the pitch to remove futures we hadn't earned. Anna thanked the timer. They handed me a card someone had actually written by hand. Inside was a Polaroid of the wall. On the back, Tamsin had scribbled, "We don't have to perform now. We just have to repeat." I drove away feeling the exact shape of why I'd said yes to Ingrid. Not to fix companies. To teach people to trust what they build together. At a red light near the freeway entrance, a text from Ethan popped up. I didn't flinch. I read it at the next gas station, sun on the hood, world ordinary. Saw a post from a Harbor Cart dev about a decision log that made fighting boring. Sounded like you. I'm happy for them. I typed, good fights leave receipts. Then I put the phone away and bought a bottle of water like a person between places. Back at the cottage, the ocean performed its one endless show without an audience. I took the Canon outside and caught that thin scene where gold sits on black for 1 minute a day. Exposure compensation. I let a little less light in so the subject wouldn't disappear. I sent Ingrid a short email. Harbor Cart installed 2 habits. Metrics attached. Next up, a non-profit that teaches high schoolers to run warehouse floors on paper before they ever touch a screen. I'm bringing Anna to guest teach. Ingrid wrote back 2 words that felt like a runway. Keep going. Inside, I pulled down the rule wall and replaced it with a clean page. New title. Company, Unfancy, D1. 1. Habit 3 to test. Credit Friday, 10 minutes, names, receipts. Scholarship cohort, 3 apprentices, not 30. Teach quietly, pay loudly. Shoes, still the ones that make me kind. I thought about that first morning under a ring light when I was told to step out of the frame. No one could make me small now because my work didn't require smallness to survive. The room I belonged to wasn't a ballroom. It was any space where people can say enough and keep building. The cottage was dark enough to feel honest. I turned the phone off. Not for protection. For pleasure. The ocean did its math and I didn't check it. In the morning I would drive north and sign a lease on a small office with big windows and no lobby sculpture. I would hang a photo on the wall, just horizon and light, and write the names of the first 3 hires on a whiteboard that already knows the grammar of credit. I would pour burnt coffee into clean mugs and set a timer in the middle of the table like a clock that runs on respect. I would let the work say my name.